It was like the song that doesn't end. COVID colored Jamaica yet again.
Sectoral interests can't push the government into decisions that affect the entire society.
Crime, the sad, sore reality.
Almighty God, is this real?
The airport shall be open for pure blood!
The Pathways Pastor and the bizarre Mobe ritual.
And the people them around there and a ball out.
America's Sha'Carri Richardson missing the Olympics but trending on the platforms. And Mamma Mia, Barbados turns a republic. Rihanna made a national hero.
May you continue to shine like a diamond and bring honor to your nation.
Wholeness still rolling the wicked.
The nation is as the nation does.
This is 2021, the year in review. Hello, I'm Damian Mitchell, and thank you for joining us for 2021, the countdown of the top 10 stories for the year based on your readership of The Gleaner. To help us analyze the big stories everybody was reading, we're joined by attorney at law Gavin Goffe, university lecturer Dr Maziki Thame, and social media commentator Suelle Anglin. Here now are your top 10 stories based on your readership of The Gleaner online. Number 10, vaccination rift rocks Adventists. Adventists skeptical of the COVID-19 vaccines were apparently being influenced by charismatic leaders such as Executive Secretary of the North Jamaica Conference, Pastor Asta Bars. He went publicly to declare on June 18 that he had made up his mind in 2020 not to take the jab because he was distrustful of the science.
Where the angel told Daniel, in the time of the end, the wicked would do wickedly. But none of the wicked would understand, but the wise would. And I know from prophetic studies that there are evil people in this world trying to take over this world. How they're going to do it, I don't know. But when
Revelation
you hear,
is very clear about that.
when you hear the theories that they call conspiracy theories, you wonder. But I don't trust what I am hearing. And if I am not convinced, I won't
You want to
get
make sure
my
that you are convinced
Yes.
before you make a
Yes.
move.
Dr. Thame, how unique was this story?
I mean, leaders of all types play a role in setting the stage for how we conceive of the moment that we are in. And around the world, anti-vax sentiment was common. Jamaica was no exception to that rule. And church leaders would have played a role in determining that as well. We see the anti-vax movement everywhere. It led to protests. It's just seems to be our moment. And there is a way that this is being debated in terms of notions of freedom and the idea that we should be able to have a choice around what we do with our bodies. But what's lost in the discussion is, of course, what is the collective good in all of this.
Very well. Suelle, what did you make of the government's approach to the information war?
I mean, I think for the most part, they did the best they could. I think it runs a very difficult line between censorship and, trying to be responsible. So I think for the most part, they did a pretty good job in trying to keep the nation informed, to try and, to ensure that there were a lot of different access to information, whether it was the talks with the Minister Tufton, to just like the different kind of updates. I know at sometimes people found difficulty with the official pages putting out information, about whether it be vaccination sites or vaccination dates or just general information. So I think generally they did a pretty good job with trying to ensure that the correct information was in the public space at all times.
Very well. But Gavin Goffe, you would agree that there were some challenges with communication. Wasn't it that the government's vaccine public relations failure was a natural consequence of its decision to abandon that proposed $422 million spend amid public pressure?
Oh, no, I don't think so at all. I think that part of the challenge that the government had is that the people don't trust them. I think we had some of the wrong messengers, but the message itself wasn't necessarily the wrong thing. I think we could look and see that their approach to trying to get into the communities and have different voices lead the discussion, I think has yielded a little bit more success than they had in the past, but perhaps the damage is already done. I think that when we're seeing some of the political undertones as well coming out in the vaccination drives, and we are seeing the issues of indemnities and who's going to pay if anything happens, and we're seeing that the opposition has taken a different approach to the message that they are sending. You know, there's so many conflicting messages out there that I think that it was inevitable that we were going to have this level of hesitancy. And spending $422 million on a marketing campaign, I personally don't think would have made much of a difference. I will say this though, that jingle, "Get Vaccinated," is really, really, really very catchy, and I give them thumbs up for that.
Story number 9. Jamaicans in the US have a beef with oxtail hike. For thousands of Jamaican families overseas, oxtail is a treasured Sunday dinner dish that connects them to happy memories of their homeland. But in September, the price more than doubled, skyrocketing from US $8.99 a pound at retail stores to $18.99 US per pound at some supermarkets. This was the 9th most read story for 2021. Gavin, surprise, surprise?
Yeah, I was very surprised that oxtail made it up so high. I'm one of those who really believe that we need to be slandering oxtail more online to bring the price down. But the fact is that, you know, oxtail has a historical aspect to it in terms of where we're coming from as, you know, poor people getting the rejected meat, and now it is the prized meat. I think it's just a fascinating story overall. But I was a little surprised to see that it made top 10.
Well, in Jamaica, the central bank is reporting that for the August to October period, inflation trended above the 4 to 6% target rate. Dr. Thame, what does higher inflation eventually mean for Jamaican meat lovers?
Beef lovers, or in general, it means people are poor. And that is something that we have to pay attention to. We're in crisis, and the crisis is somewhat inspired by COVID. But in addition to that, we have to ask questions about our preparedness, the structure of our economy, and what needs to be done to shift, to create alternatives to what exists in Jamaica in terms of the structure of the economy, and whether we'll be able to afford oxtail at any point in the future. I think most of us can't.
Story number 8, former bank employee now begging on the streets. It was the sad story of Stafford Malcolm, a former National Commercial Bank employee now living under a culvert in the rural township of Glen Goffe in St. Catherine. So, well, in a sad way, this story highlights a weak social welfare system and homelessness in Jamaica. As a young person, what would you like to see?
I think I've said this quite a few times online. I think we need a lot more to be done when it comes to shelters. And I mean, generally for homeless people, but also for different kinds of sectors of society. But I think in particular, I know, for example, the mayor of Kingston, I know a lot has been going on with kind of increasing the number of shelters that we have for people in Kingston. I'm not sure about that in other parts of rural Jamaica. I did a quick Google search and I wasn't seeing a lot of shelters available for people in rural Jamaica. And I think this again is an example, you know, of how we need to kind of boost those kinds of efforts. And so I hope going forward, we're really starting to put in more effort into ensuring that we have proper systems so that people like the gentleman in the story can have proper places, you know, to sleep, proper shelter in these kinds of situations.
Gavin, then there's also the matter of affordable housing, which for many remains an elusive dream, don't you think?
Absolutely. And 2021 brought Jamaicans no closer to that dream of home ownership than in previous years. In fact, we were seeing more money being expended to building high-end and luxury apartments as opposed to trying to make sure that the very base, those who need the support the most, have somewhere to live. And I think the focus, as Suelle said, needs to really be on helping those who are in the greatest need. And I think what that story showed is, but for the grace of God, there go I. And as much as you might have some level of security and even a job now, tomorrow is promised to no one, and we're living in such an uncertain time that even just having the stability of a home of your own is not something that everyone will ever see in their lifetime, and that's really unfortunate.
Woman prayed for her only son hours before church murder. How 51-year-old NCB credit card officer Andrea Lowe Garwood was shot dead in the pews of the Agape Christian Fellowship in Falmouth, Trelawney. Hours before she departed her home, Lowe Garwood also offered up a silent prayer. Here's what she wrote on Facebook. Good morning, Papa Jesus. You see that one egg ya, what you bless me with? My nice clean pick me. May I beg you please to guide him, guard him, instruct him, cover him under your blood. The service was being live streamed when bullets rang out in the Trelawney church. Gavin Goffe, a brazen attack by a masked gunman. Was there anything in Jamaica in the 2021 crime response to trigger hope for a turnaround?
Absolutely not. In fact, if anything, it was more despair for people who thought that we might be, at least enjoying a break from the crime because we were in a pandemic and had to be focusing on that. It seemed in many real respects that crime was on the rise at the same time that COVID cases and infections were rising. And in particular, it was very depressing and heart-wrenching to see that gender-based violence was a big part of it, and that there are so many female victims of crime. And it being in broad daylight in a church absolutely highlighted the fact that we are on a slippery slope and we are losing it. We really need an answer to get this under control, because the brazenness of some of these attacks is things like we've never seen before. It's like it's out of a movie. And it's really not encouraging for how we move into 2022.
Dr. Thame?
Yeah, I agree with Gavin. We seem to be in a time of despair. We seem to be a nation at war with itself. That is not new, but it seems to be intensifying, and I think we can feel it. And certainly the extent to which gender-based violence, and in particular violence against women, is old. But the way it is taking on, a public nature, because it is coming into our lives in a way that it might have stayed in the domestic zone prior, is an indication that the crisis is spiraling and that people's despair is leading to higher levels of violence.
Kid's wife watched as dad slain. It was story number 6 for Gleaner online readers in 2021. How 26-year-old Greater Portmore father John Ross Morgan was stabbed to death in a dispute with a boyfriend of a woman with whom he had a partner plan. Morgan, who was a security guard along with his wife and his children, went to the woman's house to collect the partner money owed to him. As he tried to leave, the boyfriend intervened, stabbing him to death. Suelle, confident any at all that by 2030, Jamaica will be that place to live, work, raise families, and do business?
Boy, I don't want to seem like a coming with anything heavy, but I mean, as a young person, I don't know how we will arrive there. It's not looking good, I think, from my end. And I think when I read this story in particular, it was such a sad story, and I think it paints the picture of so many young people in Jamaica want to do the right thing. You want to be on the right track. You're trying to do everything by the books in that order. And even in doing those things, it's still just, it just doesn't work out for you. And I think it just shows, how grim a lot of young people feel, about living in a country where you try to do everything right. And even in going by the books, there's still just no hope for you.
And then, Gavin, the wheels of justice slowly turning, certainly in the court system still.
Yeah, it's the loss of respect for the value of life. fact that you have these crimes being committed with people who have no concern whatsoever, apparently, for the consequences. And when we are even seeing that when persons are charged and taken before the court, the system doesn't really seem to move in an efficient way, which is so necessary for there to be faith in the public that things like this, even though they are inevitable, that they will actually be addressed and that there will be justice. And right now, that hopelessness extends beyond just the public domain and goes all the way into the court system.
Usain Bolt and Casey Bennett welcome twins St. Leo and Thunderbolt. It was story number 5 for Gleaner Online readers last year. Dr. Thame, a celebrity story, or was it all about the names for you?
Usain is a star, and we want to hear about his life. So I think that's what makes us read whatever is out there about Usain. You know, it doesn't matter what it is.
Suelle?
I think it's, a little bit of both. I think the way, he rose to fame is such a dream of everybody. You came from a poor, humble beginning, and here you are, this global icon. And I think, just the way how it all, came together, he had a daughter first, and then now he has, boys. And I think just the way that they did the reveal online was just so well done. The photos were just so beautiful, the outfits that they wore. And then, of course, the names, were so authentically Jamaican. I remember...
or were they?
I remember a short while, after they did the announcement, and we're having some rains in Kingston, and all over Twitter, people were saying, what is going on with his son? He needs to talk to his son. And so I think it was just, such a beautiful thing that came together.
Research team claims breakthrough in COVID fight. Menthol crystals found to block infection. In February, a multinational research team, including Jamaicans, claimed a breakthrough by using menthol crystals to stop the deadly spread of the coronavirus. This was before Jamaica got the COVID vaccine here, Gavin, but certainly it highlighted the issue of treatment for patients with the virus. You reckon the ensuing months were too much about vaccine-only approach?
I've heard that view. I don't necessarily subscribe to it. The fact is that we knew vaccines were coming from late last year, from November 2020. We knew the vaccines were coming. It was only a matter of time before they came to Jamaica. But what I do think it shows is that, people were excited to have an alternative that they felt would allow them to avoid taking the vaccine, and an alternative which wasn't as invasive. Now, it's funny because this story, I couldn't find anything else, anywhere else, concerning the supposed, power of menthol crystals to block the COVID-19 virus. So, this is really breaking news stuff there that Gleaner has. But I personally think that it was more along the lines of people just wanting something else, wanting to be able to use something else because there was such a high level of distrust of science, distrust of the vaccine. And of course, we know menthol, every Jamaican knows Vicks. So we naturally would want and hope that there was more scientific truth behind this than I'm certain there is.
Very well. So Dr. Thame, persons who had COVID, do you think that they had enough information as to how they could access treatment and what they should really be doing at home, for example?
I think that a lot was circulated, shared through social media, etc., and a lot of misinformation as well. And I think that there's certainly a lot that is still not understood about how to manage COVID. We don't trust the information that comes from the state. And in that regard, people find alternatives and they want a quick fix. They are suspicious of vaccines, as we know. And I don't believe that we've done enough work on public education as it relates to what is clearly the best option for us now, which is to take a vaccine.
Man slays 14-year-old with whom he had an intimate relationship. It was story number 3 based on your readership of the Gleaner. Andre Stewart, the stepfather of 14-year-old Jonathan Grant High School student Danisha Cooper, was left heartbroken after she was murdered. Stewart said he had tried to prevent the relationship she had with her alleged 21-year-old killer. So, well, this is more than just an intimate partner violence. It is a clear case of carnal abuse. Do you reckon that there was sufficient information, sufficient efforts to stamp out this problem last year?
I don't think so. And I think just how we talk about that kind of issue, I think a lot of times we frame the language to kind of put the pressure more on the children who are in the relationship, you know, because I think she was 14 years old, so I mean, it's a child. And I think we kind of frame, you know, the languages when we talk about these things to put the pressure on the children, you know, not seeing that there's an adult in the situation who should have not been in that situation with that child. And I'm hoping right across the board when you talk about media entities who are writing and, you know, doing the reporting on these stories, that they take a little bit more care in how they do the reporting, how they frame the language, how they frame the stories of these things. Because I think oftentimes it kind of perpetuates the narrative that we have that, you know, it's the young girls who are kind of seeking these kinds of relationships.
Bad pick me.
Right. And I also think it goes a little bit deeper when we look at poverty, you know, it's set up and how it's such a complex situation, because a lot of these young girls who are often in these kinds of situations are children from poor communities. And a lot of these men who see an opportunity, you know, to help to provide for them. And then in that case, kind of have in a situation where they're seeing them from their young, grooming them, and getting into these kinds of relationships. So I think it's a lot to discuss. It's a lot to really bring to the forefront. And I'm really hoping that going forward, even outside of laws and policies, but that we start to having different kinds of information and conversation around these issues.
Gavin, there's often the call for carnal abuse to be treated as a rape in the courts. Is there merit to this call?
I don't really practice in the criminal courts, so it's not the area that I feel comfortable commenting on. Safe to say that firstly, I support what Suelle is saying about the way in which we report it, and that language is important. And it's of course the law that if you are below a certain age, they don't use the word rape, they use carnal abuse or they use some other term. And I think there's power in words. And I'm not entirely sure why the word rape isn't used, but the language of the law must reflect the language of the people. And people want to know what it is that you are saying about this particular offense. Is carnal abuse less heinous? Is carnal abuse somehow treated as being a lesser offense than rape? Because we know that rape is one of the most egregious acts you can do to someone. So I do believe that the language perhaps should be adjusted so that it conveys the right message to the public.
This is breaking news. American sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson has tested positive for a banned substance. The flamboyant runner seems set to miss the Olympic Games in Tokyo, Japan. The Gleaner's Andre Lowe reports that Richardson's U.S. Olympic trials performance has been disqualified because of the positive test.
As far as Sha'Carri is concerned, it's also a major situation, I think, for her, a major setback.
Story number 2 was the Gleaner's global scoop. American sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson failing a drug test that ruled her out of the Olympics. It eroded the expected flamboyance for the Tokyo Olympic sprints with Jamaica's Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, Elaine Thompson-Herah, and Sharika Jackson. But did it dampen spirits any at all, Dr. Thame?
I don't think so. I mean, we were excited for our girls. And in fact, I would say that Sha'Carri added some amount of drama to the situation in that we enjoyed her flamboyance and the fact that she, in the end, you know, did not prevail. But yeah, so I think that, you know, one thing that's telling about the moment, though, is the way that the women are coming out on top and that we are able to celebrate them more. And in addition to this, I know this is not your question, but one of the things that she says, and this is kind of, Sha'Carri in response says, "I'm human." And it brings us back to that story of the gentleman who is homeless. And someone says, you know, that's a human being over there. And I think that, you know, we can kind of think about this from the perspective of what kind of world we want to build. And while there is despair in Jamaica, Jamaicans abroad are showing up and caring for Jamaicans at home through remittances. And so it gives us another side of the story, something that we can big up about ourselves, in addition to our sprinters and their performance, that we are also taking care of each other while, you know, these tragedies are unfolding.
Well, weeks later, the Jamaicans did meet Sha'Carri in Oregon, and oh, how the meme artists pull out all the stops, Gavin Goffe.
Yeah, I mean, I was rolling on the floor laughing. How you come ninth? How you come dead last after all of that? It was, I mean, you couldn't write that in Hollywood and people would believe that she would have come absolutely dead last. But you know, I'm just disappointed that so much of the story was about her and the fact that she came last, as opposed to the performances of our girls. And yes, we expect them to do well. So when they win a race, yes, it is not necessarily a surprise, but the fact that the story and the headlines and that Sha'Carri was trending on social media instead of the winners of the race, I think that just kind of shows us that we really need to not be too swayed by the drama and remember that this is sport and we are talking about excellence. And the excellence on that day was Jamaican.
This is one race. I'm not done.
The Pathways pastor and the Mobe cult.
The airport shall be open for pure blood.
The story that almost shattered the internet in October.
Yes, I'm a shoot up of a church, I'm a shoot. And the people them around there and a ball out and they're out going.
There are cult-like behaviors and cult-like a setup that we have seen here.
Murder at a cult-like church during the COVID curfew. 2 congregants killed in a bizarre ritual. Another shot dead in a confrontation with the police. The pastor, Kevin Smith, and how he funded his organization. And then that bog walk crash that claimed the life of the pastor and a young constable. This, Gavin Goffe, was like the song that just never ended.
No, it was, I mean, nobody could believe it when the news broke that, one, that these horrific crimes had taken place, and 2, that he had died en route to Kingston, having not taken the highway, but, you know, having taken the gorge. It was just, you know, some people would say it was just too coincidental, and the conspiracy theorists were definitely having a field day at that time. And I think in all of this, unfortunately, some of the story which has not gotten the appropriate amount of attention is that real people died, that people lost their lives, and that yes, we have been focusing so much on the pastor, his excellency, and the whole bizarre nature surrounding it, but there are actually human beings who lost their life in all of this, and unfortunately, their names are not being called nearly as often as they should be.
Well, let me pick up on something you mentioned there with Dr. Thame, because emerging from that was the posthumous murder charge for the pastor. Did this stun you, Dr. Thame? I'm
not au fait with the law. I think maybe Gavin is better able to speak to that. But what strikes me about the story, though, is the fact that the congregants were led. there is the charisma of the pastor, but we also have to question, what is it that is happening in people's lives that is causing them to seek this kind of escape?
How many of you were late? $200 can't pay for the whole of your Jingbang family.
And, would allow them to put themselves in danger in a way that, many of us could not understand. And I think we need to investigate some more what is happening on the ground in Jamaica that explains our current moment and just the absurdity of it, that we can't, we have to connect to the other issues, the killings, the way that we treat each other on the roads, or at least the taxi men treat us. There is just so much that is absurd that fits into what happened in Montego Bay that we need to explore some more and try to figure out how to build a different Jamaica.
Suelle, what did you make of how the story unfolded?
I mean, I think I was like, just like everybody else. It just didn't make sense. It just felt like we were living in like a weird dream or some weird loop or something, that, because every time you think you have heard it all, then the next day on social media, you see a video or something and something else pops up.
Do you not understand that Pharaoh has built his great house and he is stepping on your necks? Pharaoh tried to bring me down, but I am that I am.
But I think it's the impact that religion has on people. People want hope. People want to feel like, after this horrid life that we're living, that there is something else for me to look forward to. And I think with everything else that is happening, in Jamaica, the hardship, there's poverty, there's crime. So a lot of people are very hopeless. A lot of people are really in the ruts. And so, I think it's very easy for, a person who, is very, have a lot of good personality, they're very friendly, very easygoing. And I mean, when you look on his social media, he was with everybody in Jamaica, people who were way up there in society. So I think it was very easy for this man, to come. He has so much, status, he's, from abroad, that sort of thing. And it was very easy for him to come in and put, some things about God and religion in that. And I mean, it's a perfect recipe for disaster. And I think just like what was said by Mr. Goffe, that, I think it was just so very bizarre. And I think at the end of the day, we need to think about the people who were impacted by this. I think people need therapy. I think people need to kind of unpack what they go through. And to kind of deal with the trauma, because I remember I was listening to one the radio programs, in the daytime, and I think a few of the people that were actually at the church tonight, and there's one of the men, he literally was crying online. He was crying, and I think his wife was with him, and she started breaking down. I she mentioned that even in his sleep, sometimes he would still be crying. So I think outside of, everything that happened and, the jokes that we got from the whole story, I think we need to think about the people who were involved in the situation and try to see how best we can help, just to help them get over what they went through.
And we can't end this one without going back to the first issue. That issue, Gavin Goffe, of the posthumous charges, wasn't that stunning?
Yeah, it was stunning to me. I'm trying to think about all the charges that should be laid around, so all the politicians who have gone ahead. But I didn't know it was possible. But it's something that is in keeping with the theme for 2021, where there are so many unexpected events this year that certainly would rank high on the list.
Well, that's all the time we have for 2021, the year in review. The top 10 stories based on your readership of the Gleaner. Thanks to attorney at law Gavin Goffe, university lecturer Dr Maziki Thame, and social media commentator Suelle Anglin. I'm Damian Mitchell, wishing you a happy new year and a successful 2022. Thanks for watching.